So you can already think about the questions that you want to ask our panelists, okay? My name is Julia Stamm. I am the CEO of the Data Tank, an organization, non-profit, headquartered here in Brussels, right here at eCentral. We are a think and do tank. This is what we like to underline. And what we want to do and to think about is how to change the narrative around data. So how to move away from individual notions and only focus on consent and data protection to rather embrace the notion of using data for the common good. And in particular, how can we use this by involving citizens, people who are concerned by their data, the use of their data, and how can we bring them into the game and empower them actually to have a say and a better understanding of data use. Today we're not going to talk too much about that particular focus, but we'll talk more about the data space and the tech space, in particular the tech and data for good space. Let me very briefly introduce the panelists, but you will all find many more information on them in the beautiful booklet that we put together. So I'll just basically read them by name. We have Jeanne here, who already introduced herself, the president of the Social Good Accelerator, and we'll find out more about what you're actually doing with the Social Good Accelerator. We have Devi, a practitioner, Favor, the co-founder and CEO of FX. We have Olivia here, who is the founder of Ethical Intelligence and also proudly, I hope, a member of the Global Advisory Council of the Data Tank. We're very proud of her. And we have Chloe here, Chloe who works for the King Bernard Foundation and is a data scientist, and we're very much looking forward to exploring what this means to work for a foundation in that space. Before we get started with our panelists, I'd like you to very spontaneously tell me when you hear women in tech, women in data, what comes to mind? First thing that comes to mind. And if we can please just have one word or two, I don't mind, each of you. I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay, we'll start here with Laura.
My word would be challenging.
Challenging, thank you.
Opportunity.
Harassment.
Yeah.
Not enough.
Not enough.
Yeah, I was going to say challenge as well.
About my colleagues.
Sorry?
About my colleagues, I think about my...
You think about your colleagues? Good, yeah.
Challenges as well.
I was going to say not enough as well.
Yes. Charles?
Slightly misogynistic.
Okay. You understood what he said? Can you repeat?
Slightly misogynistic.
Okay.
New horizon.
New horizons.
Yeah, I was going to say inspiring, actually.
Yeah, inspiring.
What's a role model?
Yes.
Inclusion.
Inclusion, nice.
Challenge.
Learning opportunities. Boss. Oh yeah, let's end on that notion. Okay. Yeah, so thanks for that. Just keep this in mind, right? What you've said, what you've been saying as we advance in our discussion. So why are we talking about women in tech? I don't know, one of the LinkedIn posts that we put out on this particular event showed you, well, welcome, just find your place and see. Showed you this graphic, okay? And you know, many of you will be familiar with it, so I'm just reading it out loud, right? The Women in Tech Network safely estimates that at the current pace of change, it's going to take 132 years until the position of women in tech in the economy, until the gender gap of women in tech is closed. So 132 years. Okay? I'm going to spare you the other details. You can look at this later on. But I think there's a reason why we're here and why we're going to discuss this topic together. And I'm really thankful, Jeanne, for putting this on the agenda because it was her initiative.
It was not really only mine. It was also Nathanael Ackerman and Julie Foulon from Berlin.
So what we want to do with you today is really to talk about the opportunities, the challenges, but also to celebrate women in the space and to encourage, new women who will come and sort of take all those spots and sort of make it less misogynistic. What is the word? Misogynistic. Sorry, Charles. So I will ask you not to tell me what comes to mind when you think about women in tech and women in data, but we're talking about women in data and data for good today. So maybe we can just let me know what you think about when you hear sort of data for good and tech for good. What comes to mind? Leaders. Leaders, yes.
explore lots.
Okay.
Citizenship and democracy.
Okay. Very nice. So we have a broad range here, and democracy. I'm just going to write that down. So we are all women working in this data for good space. So what does it entail for you, and actually how does what you do, specifically your work, how does this relate, and how does it contribute to tech for good and data for good? We can maybe talk a little more about your personal background and your professional path.
Yeah, well, it's a bit new to me, but as I'm working in France with a member of the parliament on this notion, I would say it's a very interesting opportunity to develop partnership in between, especially social economy organization and public sector. To me, data for good is the data which is produced, managed for the common good. Maybe we can also consider that private corporations are doing so, and we have to get access to it. You know, this is the data strategy of the EU a bit. But the legal definition is not very clear, and I think it's important to work on it all together because data is the oil of the 21st century, so we really have to define the purpose of data to increase the common good and also to accelerate the transitions, because we are faced with multiple emergency now, especially the climate emergency. So yeah, we really have to put the data to the benefit of the common good today.
And this connects probably also to your notion of citizenship and democracy, right?
Yeah, of course, because citizens are also producers of data, but they are not aware, So it's a lot a matter of education also. I think data is really concrete material to understand the digital world, and it can be used since the primary school, in fact, to understand what is technology. I began with OpenStreetMap, which is a data common, in fact, just entering geographical data in their database, basically. And it was very concrete, and I'm not a scientist at all, but then I understood what is the big data and how citizen data can contribute to the common good.
Thank you, John. Debbie, in your work, how concretely do you contribute to data for good and tech for good?
Yes, so there's two parts. Like on one hand, I'm the CEO of FX. FX does design of experiments as a statistical methodology to actually find small data. So it's not in the big data sphere, it's in the small data sphere. That means we help companies to find data where there is actually none yet. And the interesting part is as well that actually this kind of methodology, and I'm talking to a lot of like AI specialists at the moment, can help to for people who are busy with big data and trying to find simulations and trying to find patterns and stuff like that. Design of experiments can actually close the gap when they're looking for filling in the data holes with like synthetic data to do this kind of reflection in the real world, because the design of experiments uses data from the real world at the moment, so it's not something that you make up, it's something that's really real, and like close that gap. So in that sense, this kind of statistical methodology and the evangelization that I still have to do on that part can really be an enabler for people who are busy with more data science, more like simulations and stuff like that, to close that gap. With regards to the role I'm taking as a woman in tech and being awarded already a couple of times, is that I see that with regards to data, we can talk about data for good, but if there is actually no willingness, not in the politics, not in the entrepreneurial area, to really do something with it, it's actually like a nice conversations that we can have, but nothing will change. And I really take this entrepreneurial part as well, because that's where I'm talking. It's about the ethics of the people that are busy with actually doing AI projects. And if we talk about the large things like Palantir, for instance, with Peter Thiel, none of us can actually say that they're doing good things, but a lot of money is going into their projects, and today people are killed in the US because police people get from an AI program the definition of a crook, and they say they can kill you without even knowing and verifying your identity. So you have to let this sink in. This happens at the moment. And I don't see our politicians putting on a stand to say, no, we do not agree with it. Even though Margrethe Vestager is doing a tremendous job, there is still a huge lobby from entrepreneurial organizations that actually are always saying, yeah, but those laws are going to prevent us from doing things for the good. Unfortunately, reality says that they're doing a lot of things for the bad. And so as long as there is no legal framework that says what you can do with those amounts of data, for me that's, I don't see a future where data will be used for data for the good, and for women it's even worse, because as there is no decent data on health, on what we do, on how we behave in society and stuff like that, we will not be programmed into AI programs for governmental purposes or something like that. So with regards to that, I do believe a break on AI and like reflection is absolutely necessary. And coming from a tech space, often I'm regarded as like, you know, not being a tech enthusiast, and actually I always say, in fact, it's the other way around. It's not because I can develop an atomic bomb that I should not think about the consequences when it is used to kill people. And yeah, so that's how I stand. And therefore, I think that there is still like a lot to explore on with regards to this AI sphere.
Thank you. I think it's great to have someone really who talks about this also in a very passionate way. Really puts the finger on, this is not working out, and right now I don't see a future for data for good, and what do we actually need to work towards to change that.
It's there when we indeed have politics there, but because politics is paid by entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs are actually often, unfortunately, led by ego and not by ethics, there's a big problem.
Maybe ethics is well the best transition to what you're doing with your ethical intelligence. And so can you tell us more about how this maybe also relates to what Debbie has just been saying, and you know what you're contributing, you know, very practically to the future of data for good and tech for good?
Absolutely. So I am the founder of Ethical Intelligence. I'm also an AI ethicist, which essentially means I work with clients to enable the reflection of our values in our technology. Ethical Intelligence is an AI ethics advisory firm, so there's they connect at the end of the day there, and it really connects into that data for good space, because you can't have AI if you don't have data. And so a lot of the projects and work that I do actually start at the root, which is in the data and the collection and our governance practices and data ethics practices, to understand what our values are on a data level, and then how that's reflected into our AI systems. From my perspective as an ethicist, there are two sides to ethics. You have the risk mitigation side to ethics. This is where we see regulation. This is where we see compliance. This is where we see the mindset of I need to protect. I need to protect, I need to prevent violations, I need to prevent bad things from happening. And so when you're looking in the data for good space, that means ensuring strong data privacy practices, ensuring that we are eliminating unwanted bias in our data practices, and so on. It's a very important mindset, and it's very much focused on let me protect for my values. The other side to ethics is more of an innovation approach. This side is one where you're not necessarily asking, am I protecting for my values, and more, am I aligned with my values? It's pushing creativity in a different direction. And this is actually the side that I personally spend a lot of time researching. It's one that I find very exciting. And I think it's one that has a brilliant opportunity for data for good, for tech for good, because it poses the question, not just, are we doing okay? Have we prevented bad things from happening? But it's pushing it beyond that and going, have we actually really achieved what we can? And I'm a firm firm believer that the future of tech in general, it's not necessarily technical advances that we're looking at that are really going to change the face of how we work in technology, but actually advancements in our understanding of how we get our values and embed our values into our technology. We haven't really explored that field yet. So I get very excited on that innovation side. To link back to actually the word that I used before, leaders, I have to speak to say that in my space, in the responsible AI, data for good, tech for good, we're called many names, but some of the first movers were and are women, and some of the strongest voices in my space are women. And that's why I say leaders, in the sense that I really strongly believe that some of the best leadership I've seen coming out of my space have been women.
Thank you. I think that's something I would love to explore as we move on with our discussion. Chloe, working with the King Bouillon Foundation. So what is your relationship? Also, what's the sense of the foundation when it comes to data for good?
Yeah, sure. So at the foundation, it's also, as Jan said, it's quite new. So I think it started 4 or 5 years ago that a data team started at the King Bouillon Foundation. So first, the foundation receives a lot of financial method again you use to support a lot of projects. And I think the first idea was, okay, how data can help to guide the project that we select to make sure that we make the most impact. And that's one of my first jobs, is like to use data to be able to guide our project, to find the best project and choose the project that has the most impact. And that's really, I think you have a nice impact on the society if you can say, okay, this kind of topic, for example, needs a lot of help, and this one has already a lot of means, so we can focus on the one that needs the most help. We have also part of my job is also an indirect impact, where I will more help the foundation work more efficiently thanks to data. And there, thanks to that, then the foundation is more efficient, and you have then an indirect impact. That's a big part of the job. Also, the management choosing the strategy, making decisions based on data. That's something where you feel an impact, but it's not direct in society. What really passions me is when you have a direct impact. When, for example, we have a project where we use data to find in Belgium what are the best places where we should plant more trees, for example, thanks to data, satellite images and stuff like that. And that's really concrete. Then you have a direct impact on the project. And that's really something I'm passionate about.
Yeah. So it's really about changing things, right?
Yeah.
Understanding where changes need to happen, how you can go about making it.
Indeed. So it's more like concrete project, tangible, and it's true. We also are referring to what you were saying. We also are thinking about using AI and data to, for example, be sure we do good, as you said, like detecting biases in the selection process we do and stuff like that. But now I'm thinking, yeah, we should go a step further because of what you said.
Perfect, already. Exactly. First insights. It's fabulous. Thanks very much, Chloe. What I really also like about today's panel is that we're having women who are coming from the entrepreneurial world, really trying to change things there and move things forward, being leaders in the space. But we also have the public sector present with the foundation, and I'd like to dig a little deeper into also what brought you to working in the public sector. You're normally not born as women in tech or women in data, right? So it's a path. It's sort of your own professional path that sort of shapes you and then also makes you to who you are today, my panelists. So I think it would be really interesting to explore a little more deeply what brought you to the space. So I would love to start with Debbie. I looked at your website, Debbie. I read about it, and you wrote, well, it hasn't been a walk in the park. So can you maybe tell us a little more about that? So how did you get interested in this space? What sort of frustrated you, and what brought you to where you are today?
I think that tech has interested me always, like all along. I was always there. I say, whenever something new came into the house, I was the one who dragged it from my mom's or dad's hands and would install it, look at it, read the whole manual, and be busy with how it worked, and programming. So I was the one that programmed the video recorder. Yes, I'm that old. But my mom worked for FTT Belgacom at the moment, and at that time, And so telephones came in and out of the house on a regular basis. So I was also the one who wanted to figure out how the semaphore worked. Like the first, we had the first tablet computer, we had the first mobile phone, stuff like that. So I was always there. So when I wanted to go study, I was thinking I'm going to go for a civil engineer. I changed schools. I went for 8 hours of math and science, and then that's the point where it happened, where I first met those teachers who would compliment me on my lovely legs and would say, "How, the sun is out, now we're going to see those nice young legs running around." And I was like, "Ew, that's icky." Or the ones who were hanging at your shoulder and trying to look into your top and stuff like that. So I started ordering t-shirts, and then they were making comments on the fact that I dressed like a boy. And you know, it continued, like very small microaggressions. Then you have also like the first boyfriend, and you feel like he does not like strong women either. And then there was at school an incident where they also, like I said, just talked over women in a very demeaning way. And at the same time, I had a friend who was actually studying civil engineering, she was 1 year ahead, who came crying every night. And so the parents talked to the parents, and my dad was like, "Yeah, I mean, this is not going to happen, that you're going to do something like that." And my points in school also went down on the mathematics because it wasn't a nice environment. I felt harassed actually every time I went to class. And so that's not the walk in the park. And then you start course. So I studied communication science, which was the closest I could get to actually the sphere of communication and telephones and new technology. So that's what I actually studied. And then comes the job, and you know, I always found that part where I could still be busy with the technology and still be busy with writing papers. So I was actually, when I started my career, I worked for Guy Verhofstadt, and I was the one who actually was for the interkabinetaire werkgroepen appointed for following up everything that had to do with IT. So I was in heaven that I could do that, and in my private atmosphere, I was building a website, and I was doing all these things. So I was always doing what I loved the most. So the walk in the park is the point where you want to really choose for it, and you feel like that it was a boys' environment. And the fact that if I asked men to explain something to me, they kind of didn't want to give me the basics. They just like went to a certain level, and they were like, "Yeah, you have to like cross that bridge, and if you cross that bridge, then I will tell you how it works." But I'm like, "No, just give me like from the beginning, like how does it work?" And at that moment, it wasn't that the internet was so fluid, like abundantly available information. So they also like learned it from someone, and they didn't want to share it. And I found that so frustrating that every time, and it's in every aspect of our lives, there is an information flow where we are not included in, and that we kind of have to figure out for ourselves. And then if you have figured it out, then you belong to the gang. And so also in my own company, Flow Pilots, it was the same. We had these very cool co-founders, all prodigal children. One came from IBM and stuff like that. You know, they were there. They had been taught that they were the guys, they were the dudes, they were the jobs that really snappy, snap, snap. And I was that woman that had studied what? Communication science? What the F are you going to tell us here about IT? Whilst I was more engaged, more aware of what the customer wants, more interested in user experience and user the user systems and how the flows were. So I had so much more to give than them, and still it was regarded, because I couldn't code in the way they could code, as less. And that's the fight. And in the way of data, we're back at the beginning. It's the same problem. Yeah, everybody's looking at the data scientists. Everybody's looking at the guys that are doing the coding and understanding the algorithms. Nobody's thinking about, okay, that's fine that you're doing that, and it serves us how, and it's going to give us what information, and how it's going to help us create a better world. Oh, no, we have found a system that in America you can shoot people just like because our AI has said so. Really awesome, and everybody's applauding. And that's the struggle. I mean, and I think a lot of women feel that struggle as well. They actually know a lot. Maybe are not like in the hard part, but in the more the soft part. But the soft part is where actually the decisions are being made and where it's actually molded to do good, to do the data for good, and not in the part where they're just like blindly pushing code out.
Thank you, Debbie. I would like to immediately hand over to you, Chloe, because there are a few years between the two of you, not too many, but for sure you have been studying data science, right? And you are now in the space that you would have loved to be in,
Yes.
right, at the beginning of your career. So I'm just wondering how you are sort of hearing what Debbie is saying, what this sort of, how this resonates, what this evokes, and then also what your experience have been.
Yeah, when I hear your story, I feel lucky actually indeed, because yeah, I certainly had some challenge, but I didn't feel like I couldn't do it because I was a woman or something. So I really chose indeed the strong mathematics, strong science, and then the study in data science, engineering and stuff. The only thing that I remember that was always said to me is like, oh yeah, but you achieved because they needed a woman, because there's those quota, because it's good to have a woman. Like I remember physics exams where everybody was, had bad scores and I was just good enough. So I was so happy, and we said, yeah, they had to let one woman pass, so it's probably why you got those scores. And that feels really bad because you see, and you think it's not really your work or what you studied that achieved this. I remember that for also being selected in my first job, those kind of remarks. But then in the daily job or in my job now, I feel really hurt, and I feel like maybe because I'm in a foundation and they are really into that, they have those values, but I feel like, yeah, I have really a voice there and it's getting better. And I think it's also something, maybe the non-profit sector can really be a first example where women can really have a voice, where in Data for Good there's more and more women and there is a place there. I really have the feeling like it's really nice because you have values like empathy or being able to feel a lot of emotion. It's valuable there. It's like, it's a strength and it's seen like that. And I think there, yeah, it's I feel lucky then to be able to work in that kind of environment. But yeah, so I studied business engineering with a major in data and analytics. Also, I think it was the first time those area like data was really a study that you can choose to do your 5 years in data. Like I don't know how it was before, but I feel like it was a new thing, and so it was really nice to start with that. And then I did work in a consultancy firm for KPMG for 4 years in data and analytics too. So there I learned a lot of difference, but indeed the environment, the work environment was a bit less nice than in the foundations.
Yes, I think it's sort of, it's you know, it's some hope also that you're spreading.
Yeah.
Things might change. Also, you know, that probably the foundation world could be, or the public sector could be a place that might be leading when it comes to values.
It can be an example maybe, and then we can go from there and spread it.
Talking about values and ethics, right? Yeah, it's really your space. So maybe you can go a little deeper and tell us what ethical intelligence actually means, how this also relates to the values that we have already been bringing up, and what I would be personally interested in, was there one defining moment in your life where like, that's my space, that's my area, I'm going to work on that, probably focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So ethical intelligence is the name of my company, but also something that I talk about quite a lot. We have different types of intelligence as people. We have a logical intelligence, we have emotional intelligence, and there is a type of intelligence that is based in ethics. It's our ability to identify different scenarios as being, it's called morally laden, if you're going technical terms, but it basically means that you are making decisions based off of your values. That there's a specific scenario, like do I tell my friend that their partner is cheating on them or not. That's a decision that you are weighing your different values, you are trying to make your decision to align with your values. That's a more related decision. Being able to work through those scenarios, being able to understand the decisions that you're making, the trade-offs that you're making, that's a type of intelligence, that's ethical intelligence. In the tech space, what we're doing there is actually surfacing a very natural process that we already engage in. We as humans, day to day, work with values, understand values. You've probably made, I would say, at least 10 ethical-based decisions on your way here this morning and didn't even realize. It's just something that runs kind of like a background processing. We don't really know it's there, we're doing it. But in tech, we actually have to surface those conversations. We have to surface that decision-making to be able to fine-tune it, refine it, understand. Basically, we have our perspective, our ethical intelligence, but someone next to us is going to have a different perspective and a different understanding of values. It's the combination of those that then becomes the powerful opportunity in the tech for good space. So that's a little about ethical intelligence. And then myself, I actually am coming from a humanities background. So I'm a philosopher. And I did start out in physics and then quickly realized that I loved the theory more than the mathematics and transitioned over into philosophy. Actually, I went in through logic, which is more like mathematical equations, but I said that was my drug of choice, and I went over towards philosophy. But a lot of what I do in my work and my aha moment is I try to make space for people that are coming from non-traditional tech backgrounds, which quite often are women. We as women are more in tune with the emotions and the feelings of people around us. It's just how we grow up in the world. And that's actually very, very powerful in the tech for good space. We're able to tune into a different, basically tune in at a different level than necessarily other people in our counterparts. Not saying one's better than the other, but we have a certain, almost like secret hidden superpower that we can tap into that really helps us in this space. And so coming from a humanities background in a very tech heavy space, I can't tell you how many young women I talk to say, I come from humanities, or I did philosophy, or do I have a space in tech? Do I need to learn to code? And I always tell them, you absolutely do not. I do not know how to code. And I will say that over and over again. I do not know how to code. It doesn't interest me, which is fine. There are people that have brilliant minds that it fascinates them. I'm fascinated in a different way, but it's coming together, that combined effort that really exceeds the power. How my aha moment, how I got into this space, I grew up in the Silicon Valley. There was never any question or debate of whether or not I would work in tech. It's kind of just assumed. Like, okay, well, one day I'll be a tech founder, got it. It's your birthright almost. But I left the tech space for a while to study ethics and morality, which has always been my fascination. I'm not entirely sure why. I think I've always tried to explain to people, but I think we as humans on an individual level, we all are trying to understand what life is, and we have different ways of trying to understand that. For me, I understand life through ethics and morality. I think it's fascinating. I go deeper into that field. Where it carried over into the world of data and AI, data and AI is a reflection of our humanity, so it provides a whole nother layer where we're able to almost hold up a mirror to ourselves and be able to further explore our values in a different realm. And to me, that's fascinating. And it was actually here in Brussels, I promise I'm almost done. It was here in Brussels at an event. There was a woman from Huawei talking, speaking about what are the new up-and-coming trends in data. And I was a researcher in GDPR and data privacy before GDPR was in effect, so it was the weird gray zone where everyone was trying to figure out what it would mean. And the woman from Huawei mentioned, oh, one of the next trends is data ethics. It was the first time I'd ever heard that. And I promised myself, as soon as I found something practical to do with ethics, with philosophy, I was going back. I was going back to do that. I'd taken a little bit of sidetrack and done more digital innovation and strategy. And I heard data ethics, and I said, oh, okay. And I walked out of that conference, and I went and applied to master's degrees. And from that day, I've been working in AI ethics. Again, it wasn't I never had the debate of, should I go into this field? Is this something that I want? It was more of, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I think it's fabulous to have this different array of paths for you maybe to listen to and to connect to. And also made me think about, what this might mean for you. Jeanne, now turning to you. So I have a couple of questions I would love to ask you. So maybe I'll just ask all of them at the same time, and then you can pick the ones that you feel most comfortable. So, a couple of months ago you reached out and said, Julia, we want to do something around women in tech. And I immediately jumped on it, right? So my first question was, why do you think we still need to talk about it? Or why did you think at the time we still need to talk about it? I think the point has been made that there's a good reason for it, but what drove you personally?
Yeah.
That's the first. And the second, I'd like to connect to what Olivia has been saying, as women being having our hidden superpower, right? And connecting to emotions, also doing maybe better, having, not for everyone, but having a good way of connecting to others. So you're the president of the Social Good Accelerator, and social, right, is also very often associated with something that women particularly associate with or are affiliated with or drawn to the social sector. And you're working on social tech at Social Good Accelerator. So I guess my question would be, how do you, first of all, what does social tech mean in this space, and also how do you see the space maybe evolving and the role of women in the social tech space evolve?
Yeah, thank you for these questions. I can rely a lot to what has been said because I have a political sciences background and sociology background, so I was not meant to work on technology. But it was like an appeal. I was at the Web Summit in Lisbon in 2016, and I just became aware that nobody was talking about social techs, and I saw the rise of social tech models in France, and I was like, okay, we are in Europe. We have to shape the digital model which relies to European values. And we are not talking about social techs. There's a great issue here. I have to create a movement. And so we did. We are numbers in fact. With the Portuguese and the Belgian and the French to begin with. And so indeed in the social economy, there are more female, of course, because it's the care economy, so female are more attracted to these jobs. And what's, sorry for my language, but pisses me off, is that they are not, but people in the social economy, in generally speaking, they are not feeling incapacity to understand the technology. But I think digital culture is very accessible when you are coming from human sciences. And digital humanities is a very interesting new discipline in that matter. And especially concerning the data space, because we are all data producers, but we are not aware of that. And it's a lot a matter of strategy, in fact. If you are just thinking about the purpose of data, then you're getting easily into it. In fact, I believe that. And of course we need data scientists then, but you can just understand the purpose of data. And I think when you explain that within the social economy, which is again in majority composed of women, you're getting social economy aboard on the digital transition train. And they are greatly on the side for the moment. And that's why, to me, it was obvious to relate the two subjects, to summarize.
Yeah, thank you, Jeanne. Something that came up, but only very briefly, with you being sort of by default drawn to the tech space and more as being expected, right, to do something in this space, right? We're talking today about the European data for good space. We have 3 Europeans here, we have you here, you spend half of your time in Europe.
I'm hybrid, I'm hiding.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, let's, for the sake of the argument, let's say that you're not entirely European.
Yes.
Not 100%, but for sure a lot. So my question would be, how do you experience the European space be different from the one in the US, and in particular, maybe in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and the sort of also the role and impetus that women in the space have.
Yeah, and especially with the Tech for Good lens as well. So there is, for me, a very stark contrast between the US and the EU in their approach. I would say the US is actually far behind when it comes to anything around Tech for Good. They finally woke up and are doing something about it. But I started my career over in this space in the European Union because there is already this embedded sense of our values matter. It was less of a conversation of values are important and more of, yes, I understand what values are we talking about and what are we doing with them. We were starting the conversation from a different point. So there was more openness to that concept of, as a community, we benefit from Tech for Good and social good. Whereas in the US, it's much more of an individualistic society. So if it doesn't benefit me personally, then why am I doing it? And so it's taken a long time to bridge those logic gaps, essentially, over the US market, where saying, well, you may not see the benefit directly, but there are indirect benefits from the Tech for Good space. In terms of women, I've seen very, very amazing women in both sectors. It's interesting. I feel like I've never actually been asked the difference between being a woman in tech in Europe versus being a woman in tech in the States. I think it's pretty similar across the board, I would say, in the sense we're facing the same challenges. We face the same hills to climb and mountains to climb. But I would say specifically when it comes to Tech for Good, the conversation's starting from a different place in Europe than it is in the US.
Debbie, how do you perceive this? Because you're also working, I think, across geographies a little. So what is your perspective also on the European space in particular?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, like Margrethe Vestager is doing a tremendous job, and indeed, in the European Union, values have always mattered more than I think in other parts of the world. And I'm very happy that we can still defend them, although we have to be honest, they're also in jeopardy in Europe. I don't think that we are standing still enough with the fact that in Hungary and in Poland and in Italy, we're getting more right-wing governments, and that they're actually pulling at the foundations of the European Union. And again, we have to admit that why is in the States values are they less important, like the general values less important? It's because it's ruled by money, and apparently it's something that you cannot like say out loud and shout out loud enough, that if we do not, dare to put the finger on the wound, then we can again talk about this data for goods. As long as we want, it won't change anything, and it's the same for the European Union. We have to, if we're serious about this data for good, you shut down TikTok. If you're serious about this data for good, you say to companies, no, although it might generate tremendous amounts of money, then you have to do it in another way. Then you have to rethink it. Then you have to rethink your economic model. Then be innovative in that part. And don't say it doesn't work because then our GDP is going to be down, and then oh my God, we're all going to be poor, because that's how they frighten people. That's how they say, oh, are you definitely going to say like that we're not going to use data in that fashion? You're going to be poor. I told you. And that's the same in the States, that you feel like that, people still believing in the fact that if we do not have that completely and utterly free market economy, everybody is going to be poor. And what do we see in that free economic space is that there are a lot of poor people, like really poor people. If anything, the data of the States are showing that after you have like a term of Trump, that poverty is increasing tremendously. Only those numbers just come in the term of Biden, but they don't see that it comes a little bit later when people are deprived again from social benefits and stuff like that. So if you ask me what's the difference, then I hope that at the highest level of the European Union, where there are all these smart men and women, that when they look into the mirror, they realize that when they take decisions that are, based on economic beliefs that are also very biased and very, steered in a certain direction with the idea of Milton Friedman in the back of our minds, and understanding how we have formed an economics that's not social in any way possible, and has given us a society where we indeed now have climate change and where we have poverty and all those things. If they do not see that when they look into the mirror that they're taking decisions one way or another, then I believe that we can head the same way than all the other countries that have less values than we have today. So for whomever is listening after this talk at YouTube, I mean, in a couple of months, we're going to go voting again. Choose your votes wisely, because you're, deciding what kind of a future that we're going to have.
Yeah, very much, Debbie, and thanks all of you for giving a lot of food for thought, I think, to our audience. And I think now it's really the right moment to hand over to you. I'm sure you have a lot of questions and thoughts, so please, make yourself visible and say who you are, and then what you touched and to whom you think would be. Yes, Laura.
I'm Laura. I work at the Data Tank, and actually, Olivia, I had a question for you. You talked about some differences between Europe and the States, and how would you say culture influences the definition of what data for good or tech for good is, and do you see that impacting perhaps any frameworks when it comes to cross-border data sharing and any obstacles it provides?
Absolutely. In the States, data is seen as a resource to take, and if you are able to take it and you're able to basically bring it together and have those data sets, then you are the value creator. You are the one that has generated, this is valuable. Without me, the data collector, there is no value here. Versus in Europe, I see a bit of a different, it's very subtle, but a bit of a different approach where me as an individual, as a data creator, whether I know it or not, as you were saying, then me as an individual, my individual data is valuable. I've already created value, because without me, and without my collective, but without me, there is no value, there's no data at the end of the day. And so in Europe, we have the closer approach on data privacy and data sharing there, being able to crack down on, well, you as an individual, you are contributing, there is value in that contribution. The US, which is surprising considering the cultural focus on the individuality, the US though still looks at it as, well, you were the one collecting the data, therefore there is value there. And there is, I think the trade-off that's happening quite often in the US is favoring the data collector, because it's this understanding of, well, if we don't have that data collector, then you're not going to make money, that kind of threat. You need to be able to collect that data, you need to be able to make that money, and that's where this is driven by. And the more data I can collect, the better, versus well, can I do the same thing with less data, which is coming more from the European side. So there's subtle differences. And I will say as well, because you're asking the difference in terms of definition for tech for good, there is a movement coming out of the Bay Area where it is this focus of effective altruism, essentially. AI is going to take over, and they get this kind of doom and gloom. The US right now, there is a lot of effort happening in the tech for good space to actually take that conversation back under control. There is a difference between a doom and gloom, AI is taking over, it's our overlord, versus in the moment actual hard challenges that we're trying to cover in the tech for good space. There is a difference between that long-termism and looking at the short term. And the tech for good space is still focusing, as we need to, on the here and now, how do we fix things now? what are the steps that we can do now? How can we change our approach to innovation and in AI and data now? That's very important. The conversations of our AI overlord is a bit of a red herring, I feel like, and this is my personal opinion, but the bit of the red herring of we'll distract you so we can continue on with our current practices, even though it's the current practices that need to be fixed.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
I was quite curious because, hi, I'm Vanessa. I'm an AI coach at BCode. I also have worked as a consultant for a kind of tech for good company that was women-led actually, and they're an international company. And the conversation about data collection versus data ownership was really interesting because for them, the goal was to aggregate open source data, right, to make it accessible to different stakeholders. And sort of take the process of, okay, we have all these indicators of statistics about women around the world, how do we make it usable? But a challenge I found, and I hear a lot, is that, you know, data for women can be scarce. Data for very troubling trends for women is like sexual harassment, domestic violence, all these things. And I found that even when people are saying, okay, yeah, the situation for women is challenging, the situation for women in the world is challenging, you say, okay, we have this data, limited or not, we try to make a point with it, but then people don't want to listen, they're looking for the bottom line, right? Like, but then how does this affect me? Oh, I can't really do much about it, I can't really change the situation. And I know it's a very broad question, but in your experience, coming from all these different sectors, what is it that you see helps you, you know, change the narrative, change the conversation, say, hey, like, okay, all these things matter, and I shouldn't have to, and this is my personal opinion, I guess, I shouldn't have to prove to you that this is a challenge. You know, the data is there, women are coming and saying it's a challenge, these are our experiences, and there's still like a lack of listening, I feel, at a bigger level.
Who would like to go first?
Maybe just very briefly, and it's indeed so. I think everybody already knows the book Invisible Women, and it is, I think, these kind of books that help to let people understand, like, indeed, what it is the challenge for the lack of data on women. But on the other hand, what you can do in letting people understand you is by knowing your own history. And the thing I like with the booklet from the Data Tank is it shows a lot of women that have contributed to the space. And it's also what I did yesterday at another talk is showing what happens when you don't have that data, and also giving a little bit of history lessons, how things can change, how there was 38% women in computer science in the 1980s. Why do we have only 17% today? Because something happened. What happened? Well, commercial and social inculcation and making you think differently about roles of women and men in society. And by giving those things, you know, that it was once different, and we can change it again, helps to avoid the discussion about how it is today, to show that it's not fixed and that it can still like evolve, and that helps. I find it to be helpful to do these kind of discussions.
Also showing sometimes examples I feel from other countries where it's happened better, or where you see better statistics, it really helps in the conversation. You know, there are some countries like Ireland or islands that are doing really great things. Even some country, I think it's in Rwanda, where the women are more everywhere in high management. It's more women than men. It's like a country in the middle of Africa, and they are getting better. And it's nice to understand why it's better there. And you can see real example where it worked.
I take two different approaches. One, when it comes to ethics, is I talk about ethics in terms of economics, which sounds very strange. But when it comes to women in tech and collecting data, making sure that our data sets are well-rounded, I don't phrase it in terms of, well, it's fair, it's good to do that. I say, well, you're not serving half of your user base. You are leaving 50% of your profit on the table if you're not doing this. So it sounds funny to make that leap, but it does communicate in terms of the bottom line. You go, okay. The other, want to call it a trick, but the other, I guess trick that I do is I speak about women in tech, and oftentimes women in tech and the tech world is spoken about as the exception, as, oh, we're trying to do this and we're making our path and it's a movement that's coming. I speak about it like it's the standard. And I create this pressure when I talk with people of, oh, you're not doing this, you're behind. It's a different approach. Instead of saying, let's lead, it's you're behind if you've not already done this. And same with that fact about women being an entrepreneur. I can't recall the statistics off the top of my head, but women are known to be a better investment. That female-led companies have a higher ROI than their male counterparts. So I speak about that as the standard. Instead of it being the exception, that's the standard. Do better.
Thank you. That's something very practical.
Yeah,
very effective approach.
Yeah, I think one of the goals today was to get a board of role models, and yeah, we need more tech feminists. Basically, we need more Lisbeth Salanders. And it's a purpose. If you explain women that girls, especially since school, that we won't get gender equality if women are apart from the tech world, because the gender gap is creating bias in algorithms, and the GAFAM doesn't care much about sexual harassment online, and hopefully in Europe we have regulation, but they have corporate social responsibility. And so we need more women, because women tend to put user first, and yeah, to rely on other women's issues. So I think it's key again, and we have also to disseminate the idea that tech is not only for scientists, it's a political issue, you know. We need women everywhere in tech, in the tech world. But especially, yeah, I think in politics it's quite of the same issue, and we are not talking about it. Because there's this idea that you can be legitimate in the tech world if you come from engineering space. And it's so wrong. We have a great example here. So let's take power.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
I wanted to address visibility and partnerships. My name is Corinna Hurst, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Brussels Binder that we did it many years ago. And it was an initiative out of the think tank sector where we wanted to make sure that women who work in think tank public policy, that they were seen. So it's a data bank of women policy experts, so to give them more visibility in Brussels where policy is being made, but also for journalists to reach out to experts among women. So, you know, when they need quotes and sound bites, they can also get it from women. So I encourage all of you who are based in Brussels, get on this list, because this is really about visibility of women in their respective sphere. But my other point related to this is it's about allyship and partnerships, because, you know, as long as sort of the women, you know, you stay in your sort of in that data bubble, it's like we need to make these connections to other communities so that, you know, it's not so foreign, it's not so uncomfortable to talk about data, to see the other connecting points that you all have in your personal story. So I was just wondering, who do you see in US and Europe or general, who are sort of your partners as you were trying to make your point to kind of, you know, let's change the discussion on data. Institutions, people, individual, I mean, just kind of where are the connecting points to the rest?
Yeah, I will begin with the answers, because I forgot one question earlier about defining what is digital social economy. It's basically social economy organization, which are association foundations, but also cooperatives or social enterprises. that have a social or environmental purpose at the core of their activity, which is, by the way, digital. And they tend to solve issues that are not addressed by the market or the public sector at all, or not well addressed. And yeah, there's a lot of amazing women in the digital social economy, and that as women in the tech sector generally have trouble to get funded and to scale up. So that's also a big issue we are trying to address at Social Good Accelerator. And some of them will testify in the second roundtable. Yeah, so I think social economy is an area to connect more with tech if you want to get more purpose and to make more data for good. And public sector, of course. We're partnering with the French National Agency for Territorial Cohesion, and they have this amazing program called Digital Society Program, working on digital inclusion. And in the French state, we have also very interesting like state startups that are inspiring, and there's also more women in that field. So yeah, the social economy and public sector has to also be more connected to the tech for good activists, I believe.
Maybe more partners, allies, connections.
Yeah, on the one hand, I have my it is not easy to find all those organizations, and I do think that sometimes you have this need somewhere, and then you also need to have time to invest in searching for those organizations, and then invest time in also participating and setting things up. So I'm always grateful for people like Olivia that found these kind of organizations already where you can find information. For me, I'm a member of the STEM platform in Belgium. It's with François Chambard as president. That's, for instance, this kind of organization where we can push onto policy for more STEM education, and STEM education is important to have more kids in general being interested in STEM, but then especially more girls and people from diverse backgrounds. The other thing is what I do is I have the initiative, the ADA Talks. It's a small initiative. It's organized especially actually for encouraging women to connect with each other. We do it every quarter. It's a small-scale organization with 20, where we invite 20 women. And the reason we keep it small-scale is to make meaningful connections. We want you to get out of those network events with really like business cards in your pockets and new connections being made, so that I hope they keep on connecting and paying this kind of paying it forward, so that women are connected already and that they're talking about it. And we always invite speakers on certain topics, so also on data and ethics and all those things. We can still do a lot, but having these kind of initiatives helps, of course, to connect women with each other. But you're absolutely right, because your question is spot on, to feel like where can we do even more, and to not have it all as scattered initiatives. That's also something that we have to make sure that it doesn't, like you have a little organization here and a little organization there, but that those kind of organizations at a certain point become linked to each other and interchange information and knowledge.
You want to add something?
Maybe just, yeah, indeed, the idea of having like a mapping of all the initiative around that subject and be able to create links about between them, because I think it's a lot of small initiatives, but when you put them all together, maybe they have a bigger voice. At least at the foundation, it's one of the biggest, big part of our work is also to do advocacy work for the politics and stuff like that. And that's definitely one of the partnership, because in the end, if you want to do a new regulation or have an impact on the new regulation, you have to go there. And I think that's also the role of the social society. It's not like the businesses, it's not the public, it's in the middle, but then you have a different voice and you can bring that voice on the table, and it's heard and it's useful, I think, for politics to have that voice. But we have to push it more, because the businesses and the enterprises, they are way more advanced on that topic, on data and technology topics. But if we don't go that far as them, and we don't have an advice to give on those topics, then we are missing. It's only the voice of the business world. So it's really time and urgent that the social society has a voice in there.
I would say, and this is more on a personal, I guess a personal approach, and the approach that I've taken with my company, Ethical Intelligence. I like to collect people, which sounds funny to say, but I love bringing together people that feel a bit like they're misfits, meaning they come from an interdisciplinary background, they usually question things a little bit more, and they always have this little nudge sitting in the back of their head of, could this be different? Could this be better? And so I've started to just collect them over the years. And one of the aspects of ethical intelligence is we have a growing network of practitioners that we call them the doers of responsible AI. They're either people practicing and working in the tech for good responsible AI space, or actually people that work in tech or work in, let's say, more traditional industries within tech departments that are committed to this tech for good, are committed to utilizing responsible AI practices. And we bring them together and we connect them and we find ways to stimulate conversation that goes across different disciplines. And so I guess from my end, my allies are all the misfits that I've collected over the years that are really quite brilliant and beautiful people. And I personally get so much out of those conversations, so I selfishly am making more opportunities to do those just because I find them so fascinating.
So many thanks. I would also like, in addition to the partnerships that I really think are so key, acknowledge the importance to involve men in the discussion, right? It's not a discussion conversation that we can have just among women, and I would like to applaud and salute with the men that are in the audience today. Thank you for being here. If I may ask, you don't have to respond, but is there something about the conversation that sort of, I don't know, triggered something or some reflection that you would like to share with all of us? Yes, Pedro.
I don't know where to start. I went to engineering school, and then we were talking about the challenges to be a woman in engineering school. I was thinking, wow, I didn't think about all these things. You know, like the harassment of the others. Of course, you see that everybody was flirting to be single. Girl in the room of 30, of course I can imagine that it's difficult. Then, so there are many things that I now have come to my mind. One, I work for a European agency, and I see how this discussion about the difficulties of women in tech is not going on, and it's quite annoying, because I see a lot of posts over for managerial posts, and I see that there are not many women applying, right? So then this thing like, you got the job because you're a woman. And I see that a lot of times women do not apply to those jobs, and then those women that would deserve to be there are not there. And then the person that ends up in that job is someone that's been pushed, okay, you go there because the system wants this person to be there, and then the system ends with the wrong person, the wrong place, and then everybody criticizes the person. Anyway, so I'm thinking that I would love to have this type of discussion in this type of environment when you have all the structures with the very difficult structures to change and to shape, but I think there is a lot of opportunities to changing this. Our only just discussing about our path. I was very curious you asked a question about how do you find the people that likes. I was thinking more in terms of the personal level. Not thinking I'm going to look for the right NGO or the right company, but more when you are sitting in your office and you want to do your work or your laboratory or whatever, how do you find those allies in order to help you move? And I think that's probably the difficult part. So you have to double work. You have to do your job and then find those allies that help you advance. And I, in a way, it's quite, how to say, I mirror a lot in what's all this discussion about me, because I'm not white, I'm Mexican. So also I face those things like that. You have to double work to show that you are as good an engineer as the other. So that's what I feel that I can understand. But of course I'm not a woman, so I would never understand. but I would love to have this type of discussion in these big public organizations such as
I think we're nearing the end of our conversation. We touched on many very important things. And I really want to thank you again also for being so passionate, for being advocates in this space, and for being out there, right? And for leaving your marks behind, and also for encouraging new generations of women. And some of the things sort of that I'm sure taking away is what can we change now? I've been saying, not just always looking towards the future and saying what is it that we can fix in the system now? How can we sort of get out of the current structures, and how can we really sort of put the finger on the wound and say this is not working out, why is it not working out, or what exactly do we need to do? And then also I love what you've been saying, let's look at history, things can change, right? And not always just looking forward, but looking backwards and saying what do we learn, right? And what does it need to actually change? Coming back to the question of culture, right? What does need in terms of cultures also here or beyond? Jeanne, you mentioned we need more tech feminists. I think that is a quote that I would also take home. And Olivier, we were also talking about data and AI as a reflection of our own humanity. And I think that's very profound and something that I would for sure think about, because it takes so many different dimensions. It really connects very nicely to the opportunities, but also the challenges, right, that we're seeing as we're moving forward in the data for good and tech for good space. So before I close this discussion, I would like all of you, each of you, to maybe answer two questions. The first one would be, like to end on a very positive note. So what is it that you most enjoy in your work? And the second is, what is the one thing that you would want our guests to leave with? Well, as they go back to their occupations of the day. Jeanne, can I start with you?
I think it's already use baseline, but connect people. Connect people and areas that are not talking with each other. I'm getting a lot of inspiration and role models to talk about then after here. So thank you to you all. And I think there's a beautiful convergence, like in between all of our testimonials. So thank you very much.
Chloe, what is that you enjoy most in your work, and what do you want our guests to take away?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really amazing in that field is that there's the more we are, the better, and we really need more people in that field. And there is also, as you are here for good, there's no competition. We all need the same goal, and we will all work in the same direction. And that's a huge feeling, and it's so nice to have that competition take away, and we all have the same goal, that we want the society to work better. And so the connection are way more meaningful in a networking event like that than in a networking event that you have when you work in a private for-profit company, for example. So that's one thing. And what I would like that people remember is that, those already the awareness that this field exists. Like I remember when I finished university with a data background, I didn't even think that we could work for data for good. I thought like data and technology is something for big companies, something a bit for the elites, and that it's not something that the NGO are working on, and that the nonprofit is working on. But yes, it is, and it's more and more, and there is more. We are looking for more and more people, for more and more data scientists or anyone that want to work with data, even with no data background, that want to work in that field. There is place there, and there is a huge amount of project that we could do, and that we are looking for more people to do.
Thanks very much, Kilo.
Yes, I like innovation, I like tech, so being every day in that atmosphere, learning how companies are doing innovation and then having the innovation inside the company as well, just drives me every day. I'm like a real nerd on that part, and nothing makes me happier than talking to customers and then understanding what they're doing and how they're changing sometimes, like really doing really cool stuff. So I know, of course I like to work with my team and stuff like that. Actually, it's just really like the tech part that I love the most in the job. As for for you to take home is to be aware that you are brought up in a world that wants you to think a certain way and needs you to act a certain way to fit into the system that this world is. And in doing this data for good, or in the SDG discussions, but also in the discussion on women and what your position is in this world, you're actually challenging that status quo, how we are brought up to and how that we have to move around in this world. And of course, nobody likes this, especially not the institutions that have actually, kind of built the framework in what we have to operate, because it's thorns on every edge of those systems. What I want to say, for instance, just to like point out a little example, if I may, child care, the reason why this is such a big problem in Belgium, for instance, and in other countries as well, is because from the 1950s, there was a push to keep women back at home, because at a certain point after the war, men needed to go back to work. They felt bad about being, the war was done and they had a little bit of a problem with their identity, and so there was a big plan to get men back to work and put women back into the home. And so in the 80s, they were the ones that took care of the children. And so now women are back in that workspace. And the reason this doesn't change, that childcare is not something that's on the political agenda as a top priority, is because there are systems that do not want this. And we have to be really aware that in every discussion that we're doing as women, as people from diverse backgrounds, but also when we're talking about changing climate change or data for good, we're trying to change the system. And so we will have a backdraft. There will be forces that are going to push back tremendously. And being just aware already will give you a lot more resilience in the discussion. And it's important that we do not give up. And it's going to be a marathon, it's not a sprint. And that's important to realize that in all these discussions we will have to be strong. And the fact that you're here, it's a very hopeful message already.
Well, to answer the first question, I love so many things about the work that I do. I definitely have a small obsession with ethics. But I think specifically working in the tech for good space and responsible AI I love the fact that it is a new space. And I feel, instead of daunted by that, I see it as an opportunity of this is the kind of work I want to do. And I've got a whole open field, open horizon for me to blaze my own path of this is what I'm going to do. And I look forward to the day when I'm further along in my career and I can turn back around and offer a hand to the women behind me to then propel them before me, in front of me. So again, I love this space because I have that opportunity to shape how I want to work. And I will leave you all actually with the two questions that I always end every single one of my talks with. I do a lot of public speaking. And I always end with these two questions and this concept, which I think it really will resonate today. And I have to quote my ancient philosophers for a second here. The practice of ethics actually came from this understanding of, by practicing ethics, by using our values to shape our decisions, we are pursuing the good life. It's in the pursuit of the good life. The good life being one that is full of purpose, one that we find fulfillment in, and each of our good lives will look different, but the commonality between them all is the fact that they are aligned with our values. When we're aligned with our values, we can reach that good life, in pursuit of the good life. There is a concept where it is in pursuit of the good tech. And what this means is it's not only tech that is aligned with our values, but it's tech that enables us as humans to further pursue that good life. So instead of technology that is derailing us or, let's say, giving us that distraction, one that actually works with us to enable us to live more by our values and be able to have that reflection and ability. So the two questions that I always end with is, what would the world look like if we worked and we functioned in the pursuit of good tech? What would that world look like? The second one is, are you brave enough to do what it takes to find out? That's all for me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, the four of you. I've hugely enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too. Thank you for being here. And yeah, as you leave or as you stay here for a while, Jeanette, we're going also to attend the next panel. Maybe you want to also reflect on the work that you have been thinking about and